Environmental factors include a contribution that a company or government makes to our planet through a multitude of channels, including greenhouse gas emissions, waste management, energy efficiency, water usage, deforestation, biodiversity impacts, and many others. There are numerous environmental considerations that may vary depending on company's business model and sector of activity. In this course, we will take a closer look at climate change, water scarcity, and biodiversity loss. Climate change. In the World Economic Forum's 2020 Global Risks Report, climate-related issues dominated its top 10 risks by their impact, along with weapons of mass destruction, infectious diseases, and cyber attacks. Climate change has been of increasing concern for the past several years. From increased amount of environmental disasters such as wildfires, hurricanes, tsunamis, and floods, to the governments implementing regulations to limit greenhouse gas production and stimulate transition to the low-carbon economies. In 2016, 196 state parties signed the Paris Agreement, acknowledging the importance to act on this topic and committing to goals to keep the increasing in global average temperature well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Achieving these goals implies reducing carbon emissions, increasing renewable energy, and energy efficiency. This chart gives you a breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions by country as of 2019. So how does that affect companies' value and your investments? There are 3 financial risks and opportunities that arise from climate change: physical risk, transition risk, and liability risk. Transition risk that companies face due to shifting consumer demand and governmental regulations. There is a notable movement towards more environmentally friendly products, and companies that do not acknowledge and adapt to this movement will face decreasing market size. Many governments put in place funding to encourage transition to renewable energy and development of clean technology, which represents an opportunity to businesses. There is also an increasing demand for climate risk disclosure. Physical risk could arise from weather-driven events such as hurricanes, floods, droughts, uncontrolled fires that result in disruption of company supply chain and potential damages to its assets. Finally, liability risk is mostly faced by insurance companies who could be liable for increasing claims from natural disasters caused by the climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions, GHG, carbon emissions, and carbon footprint often refer to the same thing and could be used interchangeably. They all refer to the amount of gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect that traps the sun's heat in our atmosphere and is known to be the leading cause of the global warming. Greenhouse gas accounting describes the way to inventory and audit greenhouse gas emissions. A corporate or organizational greenhouse gas emissions assessment quantifies the total greenhouse gases produced directly and indirectly from a business or organization's activities. GHG Protocol and ISO 14064 provide accounting and reporting standards. Carbon neutral is a term used to describe the state of an entity, such as company, service, product, or an event, where the carbon emissions caused by them have been balanced out by funding an equivalent amount of carbon saving elsewhere in the world. A cup of latte produced about 340 grams of CO2 equivalent. Out of this amount, 4% is from a paper cup, while the remaining 96% is from the coffee and milk production, transportation, and energy of making the actual drink. Drinking 1 latte per day is equivalent to about 124 kilograms of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere. So if you want to compensate your coffee consumption and be carbon neutral, you would have to plant at least 2 trees per year. Another option would be to purchase carbon offset from projects that remove carbon from the atmosphere or reduce its production. Institutional investors are increasingly working to better understand the potential financial impact of environmental issues on companies in their portfolios. The potential negative effects from companies that do not manage environmental risks are increasing costs. Example, the need to clean up spills or restore the landscape on exploration sites. Reputational damage in the event of headline-grabbing polluting incidents or litigation costs. Integrating environmental considerations into corporate strategy can also present opportunities. Using resources efficiently will decrease your costs, while companies offering innovative solutions can gain a competitive advantage. Water scarcity. During the last few decades, it has become evident that because of a steadily increasing demand, freshwater scarcity is becoming a threat to sustainable development of human society. Freshwater scarcity manifests itself in the form of declining groundwater tables, reduced river flows, shrinking lakes, and heavily polluted waters, but also in the increasing cost of supply and treatment, intermittent supplies, and conflicts over water. Future water scarcity will grow as a result of various drivers: population and economic growth, increased demands for animal products and biofuels, and climate change. 500 million people in the world face severe water scarcity all year round. Putting caps to water consumption by river basin, increasing water use efficiency, and better sharing of the limits of freshwater resources will be a key in reducing the threat posed by the water scarcity on biodiversity and human welfare. Companies in water-intensive industries such as mining, agriculture, and beverages will face financial risks that arise from water scarcity and regulation. Biodiversity loss. According to Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's research report published in 2018, biodiversity loss is among the top global risks to society. The planet is now facing its sixth mass extinction, with consequences that will affect all life on Earth both now and for millions of years to come. Humans have destroyed or degraded vast areas of the world's terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems. These striking changes are driven by land use change, overexploitation of natural resources, pollution, invasive species, and climate change. They are occurring in spite of international efforts to conserve and sustainably use biodiversity. World Economic Forum's 2020 Global Risks Report indicates that current rate of extinction is tens to hundreds of times higher than the average over the past 10 million years, and it is accelerating. Biodiversity loss has critical implications for humanity, from the collapse of food and health systems to disruption of entire supply chains. Human activity endangers biodiversity in at least 5 main ways. First, agricultural and industrial expansion has led to loss of over 85% of wetlands, altered 75% of land surface, and impacted 66% of ocean area. A second powerful threat is in the exploitation of plants and animals through harvesting, logging, hunting, and fishing. Third, pollution. Habitats are being destroyed by untreated waste, by pollutants from industrial, mining, and agricultural activities, and by oil spills and toxic dumping. Marine plastic pollution alone has increased tenfold since 1980s. A fourth critical driver of biodiversity loss is the introduction of non-indigenous species that edge out native ones. This has increased by 40% globally over the same period. Fifth, climate change exacerbates nature loss, which in turn reduces nature's resilience to climate change, a vicious cycle. Less directly, losses of biodiversity are driven by population growth, trade, consumption patterns, and urbanization. Biodiversity underpins the world's food system. It creates and maintains healthy soils, pollinates plants, purifies water. Now, how about business risks? The destruction of nature will inevitably impact bottom lines. For example, through reduced fish stock disrupting commodity supply chains, economic losses from disasters such as flooding, and the loss of potential new sources of medicine. Extractive, construction, energy, fashion, and textiles are among the sectors especially vulnerable to ecological destruction. All businesses should account for ecological risks to their operations and reputation, but unfortunately most of them don't. A recent study of Fortune 500 companies found that nearly half mentioned biodiversity in their sustainability reports, but only 5 set specific, measurable, and time-bound targets. Nature-related risks are currently undervalued in business decision-making. As you notice, there is a close relationship between different topics under environment, how climate change has its implications for water scarcity and biodiversity, and the importance that companies and governments play through their decision-making.